Welcome to EMDR Chat with Kurt and Michelle. I'm Dr. Curtis Roundson.
And I am Dr. Michelle Gottlieb. And Kurt, we have a guest today.
We have a guest?
I know,
How come
right?
I'm the last one? And how come I never know this?
Did you not get the memo? So, our guest today, I'm going to let her say more about her journey of how she got here. But Lori Cow is...
I know Lori.
You've met her.
Yeah.
Lori is a lot of things. One of the things that she is a trainer for us, as a matter of fact. Mm-hmm. But one of the other things she is an expert on EMDR therapy and working with couples. And that's something that a lot of people talk about all the time is like, can you even do EMDR therapy with couples? How does this work? So, Lori, first, welcome. Secondly,
welcome, Lori.
Can you tell us just your journey on how, who you are and how you got to be here?
I thought all you needed to do with couples is to have two arms.
Yep. And for a family, you just shake it all, make it work.
Too. Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me on the podcast, and it's lovely to see both of you. My journey about getting here is kind of started with a passion of EMDR therapy. I was hired at a treatment facility, and the owner said, Lori, now that you're here, it's your job to make sure that all of our clients have a transformational experience. So go get EMDR trained. And you know what? I believed it. So I went out, got myself trained, and with passion, actually, worked with those clients, and each and every one of them experienced great gains and benefits. And so EMDR then has been like, that magic wand. But it's really so powerful with clients at any stage, right. To be able to bring, even if it's resolution of trauma, reduction of symptoms, or even building those adaptive memory networks where they feel more confident, resilient, all those great things. And then going into private practice, working with couples, you know what? Their reactivity with one another, they sit on my sofa and they reenact the same conflict over and over and over and over again.
And don't they though?
And don't get anywhere. And so it's like, okay, you guys can continue this, or I can go out and have a cup of coffee and come back in 20 minutes.
We can do that?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. Oh, okay, hold on.
And we'll just pick it up next time.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's like, you know what? This just is not helpful. This is something that they do at home. This is why they're here in my office. And I bet EMDR is going to be very useful with the relational dynamics if each of them do a little bit of work. So then that's where I moved into integrating EMDR therapy into couples.
So, all right, let's kind of take it step by step. First, how do you introduce doing EMDR therapy with couples instead of individuals? How do you even introduce this to your couples?
It is not very common to hear about EMDR in couples. And so it takes a little bit more education with couples because you want them to be good EMDR clients, which means they need to know what EMDR is, what it's going to look like, what it feels like, and how it's going to benefit them and their relationship. So spending a little bit more time on the front end, doing some education about EMDR therapy, and walking through what that process is going to look like and how we're going to get them prepared to do EMDR therapy. And I have some good materials that I give them and resources for them to look at outside of the session. And then come back and we have another discussion about that, and answer any questions. So it takes a little bit more in preparation time because I'm not only just preparing one client, I'm preparing both. And then if they're going to be able to do a session where one is working in EMDR therapy and the other one's a witness, I got to make sure that both of them have affect tolerance, ability to stay present and engaged. So it takes a little bit more of preparation work. But go ahead.
No, the thing that I'm sitting here thinking about is that, having done family therapy for years, that there are some systems that come in that are, cooperative and loving and supportive, and they really want to work hard to make the relationships better. And then we get the other kinds of relationships that come in and they're hostile and they're angry, and it's like a fight, like a boxing match during the sessions. I have to assume that preparation for those two types have to be a little different.
You are so right. And safety in the relationship is ultimately one of the most important components to doing EMDR therapy, not only between the individuals, but with the therapist. Right. And so they have to know that the therapist has this, so competence. And then as the therapist is assessing, how safe is that relationship, then it's going to determine what we propose for that future EMDR treatment plan around doing EMDR individually, or the ability to do it where there's a witnessing partner. But safety is one of those big determinants of whether or not there is going to be a witnessing partner in that session, or do we need to do them separately?
And I think that's a really important thing that people need to remember, that you can do couples therapy individually.
Correct.
Right?
Yes. Because ultimately that treatment plan is going to be on an issue that directly impacts the relational dynamics. So this is a time for the therapist to really be assessing what they're seeing in front of them, and what they're seeing in front of them might be, the salient target, and then developing a treatment plan. So if it's conflict, then that can be the treatment plan for each of them, and we can decide whether we do it together or in separate sessions or individual sessions.
And that, of course, gives me even that next question of what is appropriate to do, to target, to have treatment plans on, what topics, what themes are appropriate to deal with in a couple setting, whether it's individually or both in the office together. And what would you say, you really need to go get individual work on this?
That's a really good question. And all of us take a really good intake. And as we're taking that intake, we're getting, experience with the couple. We're getting the information of why they're here, and we're able to see why it is that they haven't been able to move forward on whatever that issue is. And we're also taking past histories on both of them. And so when we're getting all that information and assessing, we're figuring out the impact of maybe individual traumas or traumas prior to the relationship, or the prevalence. So maybe it's one experience, maybe it's a string of experiences. And that gives an indication for the couples therapist to decide, does one or both have such a history that they both would benefit from their own individual EMDR therapist? And then when they do their individual work, the dynamics between them would be better. However, most of the time, when a couple's in front of you, those initial EMDR treatment plans could be on communication and conflict, because oftentimes that's what they've had limited role modeling, or maybe come from a dynamic where communication skills they didn't learn. So we can do EMDR treatment plan for both of them initially, even just starting off communication, which reduces a lot of the anxiety, a lot of the frustration, reactivity, emotional regulation, so that they could have a better conversation. Then we can actually even get a better assessment of what's going on.
So it's kind of like you're desensitizing the triggers from their family of origin that's interfering with their current relationship.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great way to put it. Yes, absolutely.
And even as you were saying that, and Kurt, like I'm thinking what you're thinking is like, it almost sounds like and I know the answer is it depends, but that the targets may be more on triggers rather than going back to that past prong and touchstone and all the things that we talk about all the time.
Mm-hmm. So in EMDR therapy with couples, the primary focus is improving the dynamics. So making that treatment plan and understanding that those past experiences that are fueling, but those triggers in that present column are going to be what we target first to reduce the impact of those triggers. And so it's more of symptom reduction. And at a later time, we can decide, is this something that we can do as comprehensive, or do we need to refer this out for comprehensive?
Got it.
Interesting.
I have with difficult or hostile couples, for instance, I can understand the individual work will be necessary, but I'm curious if our listeners, what might it look like if you have a cooperative and loving, supportive relationship, and you're doing work with each in the present, as you call it, the witnessing. What does that look like? How do you go about doing that?
I have a great example of a couple that I work with. They came in with an experience of having just lost pregnancy. And so they were both just devastated. They'd been working so hard to have a beautiful, healthy baby. And they had several early miscarriages, and this one was a little farther along. And so that devastation was very hard on their relationship, both of them falling into depression and withdrawal. And so the dynamics between the two of them were very loving, very supportive, caring, nurturing, but both of them just very devastated. And so in a situation like that, it's very clear that recent experience was just more than they could handle together. And so that became a treatment plan for both of them, which is the same incident, but affected them both differently. And so while one was able to do the processing, the partner was able to sit next to them, and just being able to sit next to them in silence, but feeling their energy, their support, their encouragement, was enough for the other one to feel safe enough to be able to open up and let their brain do that reprocessing, so that they got a sense of peace, or came to a sense of peace, and then vice versa. And because it's so spontaneous, the answers are unplanned. And so what comes through and out and through, each of them is really very unique. And so as a witnessing partner, you're experiencing your partner in a whole different way. What you're seeing is very spontaneous, very organic. And because of that, the witnessing partner is just engaged and entranced and watching, and it builds so much intimacy and connection very, very quickly.
I'm wondering though, as you say that I know that we tell people don't edit, just tell us whatever comes up. But if my partner's here and what came up for me was something that I feel may be hurtful to my partner, I may choose not to say something. How do you deal with that?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. And oftentimes I hear that with couples that are very loving, and maybe one partner has a job where it's very overwhelming, like a firefighter or a policeman. And so some of those details are going to be very overwhelming for a partner to hear. And so talking about details is part of that preparation stage of, like, you don't have to say explicitly whatever it is that came up. We can have a code word. So it can be a word. All that I need to know is that something is different, and then we can keep moving forward. And I think that helps prepare and eases the mind of the individual who's doing the reprocessing, but it's also protective of the witnessing partner, and they can still see the emotions across their loved one's face and their body as they're reprocessing, so they can see something intense is going on, but they don't need to hear the details because that could be triggering or even create more of a dynamic that in a way that we don't want to have happen.
The other benefit of EMDR not being a talk therapy, but a brain therapy.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Absolutely. So safety for everybody.
Now, how do you deal with it if you have separated them for all the reasons you may have separated them and you're doing EMDR therapy individually because it still is taking place within a couple's therapy and, we don't keep secrets and all of that. How do you integrate what was said outside of, in those individual sessions back into the couple's work? How do you handle that?
Another great question. So I think, not only is there a safety concern that we're assessing for doing, working with individuals, individually in those sessions, but we're also wanting to be really efficient with time. So that might be another reason why we want to see them individually, because we could just jump right in and get a lot of EMDR work done. But what we do is we create that treatment plan together. So each person has their own treatment plan. And because we've done it in a couples session, each person knows what the other is working on. So there aren't any secrets around that. And then we contract. So we're going to do 3 EMDR sessions individually for each of you. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about what you've noticed between the relational dynamics or around the issue that we've been working on. And then together we'll decide, do we contract for more individual sessions? Or maybe at that point, we can do conjoint. So really contracting and making it clear. But we also then have to talk about, after your individual session, how do you share that information, or what information do you share with your partner? So, and that's a key thing too, because they could come home from that first reprocessing session and it's like, yes, I'm so angry at you.
Right?
But that's just part of the process. Yes. So it's important to talk to both of them about, how to disclose change and what progress looks like and how to talk about that after your individual session with your partner.
And that you're in the middle of it, not the end of it, right? That you came home being
Correct,
very angry
yeah.
doesn't mean you're going to end up being very angry, right? I'm also curious, and I don't know if you have this on just off the top of your head. Is there a lot of research to do EMDR therapy with couples?
Oh, wow. Because it's not talked about, it seems like this is a brand new thing, right? But really, there is a lot of research. There's a ton of articles. Going back to, Francine, even published a book of doing EMDR, a handbook of, Kurt,
Family
the
therapy?
title? Yes. And so this has been around for a couple of decades already. And it's just that it hasn't been utilized with couples therapy. And I think just because of the fear and how do you integrate it, and there's so many moving parts and pieces and ethics and all of that stuff. So we're kind of here to start to demystify all of that stuff so that people can really identify this as a useful tool and then start to feel more comfortable integrating it into their work.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think about that, and I know with a lot of people we've trained that they want to know explicitly what's step 1, what's step 2, what's step 3. And I'm going to guess, like a lot of therapy, it's not quite that clear cut, and there's a lot of art in here. What would you say to someone who's just starting out, how to do this?
I think, conceptually, just like as a couples therapist or a family therapist, you're not just dealing with one individual or 2 individuals, you're dealing with their system and their dynamics. So it's going to take a little bit longer to move right into EMDR therapy, just because you're doing all of that good assessment, really understanding what the couple is needing or wanting, and which might be the same thing or might be different, where their skill sets are, what their openness is. And so those beginning steps is really kind of identifying key components of safety in the relationship. Are they on the same page? And then um, moving into and sharing information about why it is that their past and what those experiences of their past might be informing subconsciously how they're interacting with each other or interpreting each other. And so it's as an AIP EMDR therapist, it's really kind of taking in that whole clinical picture, and then being able to have a conversation with the clients, because really, that informed consent. And it's not that we need informed consent, because EMDR is one of those evidence-based practices that has a significant amount of research around it. But there is concern with the clients if they have not done EMDR before, of like, is this hypnosis and what are you trying to do to us? So taking a good amount of time to give them information so that they feel like, you know what, this might be a little weird to do, but we're up for it. And then being able to choose things that will help them build their sense of safety and security in the process. So even with couples in the resourcing and that preparation phase, there are tools that we can do to help them show that this is going to be beneficial, like some dyadic resourcing, and learning how to do co-regulation, all of those great things. So that helps them really buy into this. And then, having a clear plan and being able to communicate that to them directly, succinctly, reduces their anxiety, and then it just kind of falls into place. And then it's really kind of a decision tree about if they're going to do the work together or individual sessions. So I think for the clinician, it might be scary to incorporate it because there are so many pieces. But I think, we're going to lay out a decision tree that will make it very easy for them to integrate this into their work.
So we are about out of time. For those of you who want more information, as Lori said, there's Shapiro's EMDR Therapy and Family
Process, I think.
Okay. Also, Lori, depending on when you're listening to this, is either about to do a live virtual workshop on working with couples, part 1 and part 2, or it may be on demand. So it just depends on when you're actually listening to this podcast. But that's going to be another place for you to get more information about how to do this. But Lori, thank you so much for taking the time. So interesting.
Yeah,
so
thank you, Lori.
needed. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really passionate. I'm excited. I think this can be a whole transformative experience, not only for clinicians, but for clients.
Right?
Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank
and I look
you.
forward to the next podcast we do, and hope you all will be joining us. Thank you.
Until next time.